The Dallas Stars have made some roster adjustments. On today's episode, we'll take a deep dive into who got placed on waivers and who is making the jump from the AHL to the NHL. After that, we'll give you a full rundown preview of Saturday's game against the Philadelphia Flyers. All of this coming up on a special Friday edition of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, and you are locked on the Dallas Stars. It is Friday, November 12th. It's the end of the week, folks. We made it. It is once again Friday, so cheers to that. Always good when Friday comes rolling around, and we will have another Dallas Stars game day tomorrow on Saturday. But before we jump into all the details of today's episode, because there is a lot to talk about to get you sent on your way for the weekend, as far as roster adjustments and just an overall game preview for Saturday's matchup against the Philadelphia Flyers. But before we do all that, I want to take a moment and say thank you for listening to the show, whether you are a recurring listener or this is your first time here. Thank you for stopping by Locked On Stars. Thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast if you do not do so already. I truly do appreciate every comment, follow, subscription, you name it. Really do appreciate you guys. Be sure to leave a review if you like what you hear on the show. Be sure to subscribe, follow the podcast wherever you get this podcast at. But without any further hesitation, let us jump straight into all the craziness that happened yesterday on Thursday. Or it feels like craziness. Maybe by some definition it's not necessarily crazy, but it is definitely interesting and worth noting that the roster is being changed in the Dallas Stars organization. On Thursday afternoon, we saw several different roster moves made by the team. Starting around 1 o'clock, it was reported, several confirmed reports that the Stars had placed forwards Blake Comeau and Tanner Kero on waivers. And according to Mike Heika, writer for the Dallas Stars, this means that they could be picked up by another NHL team today on Friday. But regardless of whether or not they're picked up, if they're not picked up by another NHL team, they have the opportunity to go down to play in Cedar Park at the AHL level with the Texas Stars. But regardless of where they end up, this really is a move that Dallas was making, according to Jim Nill, to clear up cap space to potentially call up more players right now and in the future as the season goes on. And this is just kind of a interesting move. Kind of big in the sense that Blake Comeau is on waivers and potentially could be leaving the Dallas Stars organization. I think that was definitely a bigger surprise. Tanner Kero, I think it was something that a lot of people saw coming, that no one's necessarily shocked by. He's 29 years old, hasn't necessarily shown too many flashes of greatness or, a guy that's going to be a staple for this team. Would not be surprised to see him not get picked up by another NHL team, so we will likely see him in Cedar Park. As far as Blake Comeau, not entirely sure. Definitely kind of a big surprise. Like I said, he was, an alternate captain for the team. He's been a staple of this Dallas Stars team for several years. Never really ever at the center of attention. And I think he was okay with that. I think he knew his role as just a guy that was a veteran guy that was going to be where he needed to be, do what he needed to do, and do whatever he needed to do to help his team win or put them in the best position possible to win. He was only making $1 million this season and would have entered free agency after this season ended anyway. So I think it just made sense for Jim Nill and company to go ahead and send Blake Comeau on his way. Potentially we'll see him down at Cedar Park in the AHL, but only time will tell. Of course, maybe by the time you're hearing this on Friday, something has happened to Blake Comeau and maybe he's on another team. But like I said, only time will tell. Kind of an interesting development to see him get placed on waivers, but an understandable one if they're looking to clear up cap space. Like I said, Blake Comeau would be, gone and probably not getting re-signed at the end of this season. Frees up about $1 million in cap space. I think, we heard after Wednesday's loss that this team, Rick Bowness is saying, we know what changes we need to make. We're going to make those changes, kind of giving the vague answer. But man, talk about taking action, whether or not this is the right action or an action that's going to change the team. the team is making moves. They understand that this team is underperforming so far in this young season, and they need to shake things up. They can't keep putting the same guys out there every night and expect the result to change, because we're 12 games into this season, and we haven't seen too much to get excited about outside of a few flashes of exciting, thrilling moments. So props to the front office for at least, taking the first step and making a change. Whether or not the changes that have been made so far are the right ones, we'll see as these next few games unfold. In other roster news, defenseman Thomas Harley, who's played 4 games for the Stars so far this season, is being sent back down to Cedar Park to the Texas Stars. And in his place will come Riley Tufte, the 23-year-old forward from Coon Rapids, Minnesota. And I'm very, very excited about this move, transaction, whatever you want to call it, between the NHL team and the AHL affiliate Texas Stars. Tufte is 6 foot 6 inches, 220 pounds, so he is a big dude. I absolutely love this move. I love Tufte's physicality, his ability to skate, his ability to score. I talked about him pretty much all offseason once I started taking over as host of this show, talking about, prospects to be on the lookout for within the Stars organization. And Tufte was a guy that I feel like I brought up several times. You guys know this. You guys as Stars fans have probably seen his name thrown around on social media, just in Stars, talking circles in general. Riley Tufte is a guy that, Jim Nill and company are very excited about. I think Coach Bowness is excited about him. And I'm certainly excited to see how he plays at the NHL level. Like I said, young guy, 23, so hopefully a little more pep in his step. With Caro and Como gone, definitely not the speediest guys on the ice by any means. Hopefully Tufte is able to add a little bit of more dynamic speed. Immediately probably won't play with some of the, bigger name guys on the team. But I expect him to, come in and hopefully make some kind of an impact, just with the way he's able to play. And he's, played very, very well for the Texas Stars so far this season. Through 10 games with the Texas Stars, Tufte has recorded 5 goals and 2 assists. Before his call-up to the Dallas Stars at the NHL level, he was riding a 3-game goal streak. So he'll be looking to keep that goal streak going as soon as he's able to take the ice for Dallas. Very, very excited to see how Riley Tufte plays here at the professional level. I'm sure he's very excited, all of his hard work paying off, and he's finally getting to make, his official NHL debut. So will it be Saturday against Philadelphia? I feel like there's a good shot of it, but, we'll see. We'll see, if he makes the lineup, where he is in the lineup. If he does make it, we're going to have to see how that unfolds. But there's a possibility that some other guys from the AHL could get called up if they haven't already done so. I'm recording this on Thursday evening, and with my luck, roster moves will be made probably 10 minutes after this episode, becomes published and available to you guys, which is 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. With my luck, that's exactly how this is going to go down. But there is potential that other AHL players could get brought onto the roster, such as Jacob Peterson, who we saw early on in the season, scored the first goal of the season for the Dallas Stars against the New York Rangers. Riley Damiani, another really talented forward who I've talked a lot about on this show when talking about the AHL team and prospects within the Stars organization. Oscar Bach, another guy that's shown a lot of potential, played very, very well down in Cedar Park with the Texas Stars. So it'll be interesting to see, who maybe Dallas brings back up onto the team to replace Como, Caro, and maybe, they're going to have to potentially find someone to place Harley defensively. I said earlier that Tufte is a replacement for Harley, but Harley's a defenseman. Tufte is a forward. So we'll see what moves that Coach Bowness and company make in order to shake things up. And I'm excited to see how this team shakes things up and how they, approach their game on Saturday. Speaking of the game on Saturday, coming up next, I will give you a full preview of the game against the Philadelphia Flyers with the help of our friends over at Locked On Philadelphia Flyers. We will get a brief appearance from Rachel Donner, the host of Locked On Flyers. But before we do all that, I want to take a moment and say thank you to one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Stars, and that is Built Bar. I absolutely love Thanksgiving and Christmas time. All of the good food and treats, all the friends and family, friends and family hang out. You go to holiday parties, you go to family gatherings. There's always going to be delicious food there, and it's incredible. It's one of the best times of the year, and that's one of the many reasons for it. But maybe you want a yummy dessert, but one that isn't so full of calories and sugar. What if I told you that you could feast on something delicious and feel good about it? You can try a Built Bar. Built Bar is incredibly good for you, high in protein, low in sugar, low in calories. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end more often than not. Most Built Bars, on the other hand, only have 130 calories with only 4 grams of sugar, with plenty of protein, like I said. So replace that coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar, or go for a raspberry Built Bar instead of that raspberry pie. Lots of great flavors to replace any pie. Low calorie, low carb, low fat, high protein. You can go to built.com right now and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Next up on today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day, I want to give you a preview of Saturday night's game between the Dallas Stars and the Philadelphia Flyers. And I'm not going to do it all on my own this time. In a perfect world, myself and Rachel from Locked On Flyers could have teamed up for a full crossover episode, but just with scheduling, and also it worked out that I was able to do a whole segment talking about the Dallas Stars roster moves. I'm unable to do a full crossover episode. Maybe in the future when these teams meet up in Philadelphia later in the season, we can do a full crossover episode between our two shows. But for the time being, Rachel was kind enough to record a video of herself, audio of herself as well, kind of laying out how the season has gone for the Flyers so far. So without any further ado, let's hear from our friends Rachel Donner over at Locked On Flyers.
Hi, this is Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers with a quick catch up on the Philadelphia Flyers for our friends over at Locked On Stars prior to our two teams meeting up for the first time in what feels like forever. After not making the playoffs last year, this offseason, Flyers GM Chuck Fletcher went out and made a ton of moves in order to improve the team's defense. He went out and got Ryan Ellis and Rasmus Ristolainen and Keith Yandel. We have a new second goaltender in Martin Jones. And then looking at forward depth and some more scoring, they traded for Cam Atkinson and signed veteran Derek Brassard. The Flyers season so far has been a bit of a mixed bag. They haven't played really any complete games this season where they went the full 60, but they have played some really good games. I will absolutely give them credit for that. And they started off this season real strong with scoring from across the top six. Right now, Captain Claude Giroux and Sean Couturier are leading the team in scoring, and Cam Atkinson and Joel Farabee have also added to the team's tallies. They have struggled a little bit the last few games and nowhere as much as on the power play. They've only managed to get one power play goal in their last 5 games over 14 attempts, which is a giant yikes. They are moving people around a little bit on the power play units to try and change that, including putting Keith Yandel on the first unit where he started out the season, but then they moved him off. And so I think moving him back to that top power play unit should help and try and kickstart that for the Flyers. They're also shuffling a little bit on the forward lines just to try and kickstart that third line, which has scored a few goals from Scott Laughton and JVR, but I think Oscar Lindblom is right on the cusp, and they moved him up to the second line with Brassard. So hopefully that will help him out. And then the third line will get the energy of Joel Farabee, and both lines will score some goals against Dallas. And the other thing going on is a couple of big injuries. So Kevin Hayes, who has been the second line center and should be in there instead of Brassard, has been out all season so far. He's close to coming back, but I don't think he'll make it in the lineup against Dallas. But Ryan Ellis, who has only played 3 games thus far for the Flyers, has been out as well. And it's looking like he may come back in the lineup for that game, which would be a great thing to see. He and Ivan Provorov are very complementary for each other on that top pairing. They play really well together, and Ellis is just such a strong presence in terms of calmness in the defensive zone and getting really good puck clearings out that I think if he can slot back in for them, it'll be a real tough pairing for Dallas to play up against. Both Flyers goaltenders are actually off to a really good start this season. I am betting you will see Martin Jones in net Saturday night because it is the second half of a back-to-back road trip for the Flyers. Carter Hart will be in net the night before against Carolina. Martin Jones is 3-0 with a .950 save percentage, which is not something I think anybody would have expected, but he has been tracking the puck really well, making some really key saves in key moments out there for the Flyers. And so, I think that the Flyers are a lot more confident with him in net than we might have expected coming into the season. Really looking forward to seeing our old friend Michael Raffl out there on the ice Saturday night. Should be a great game, and we'll see you there.
A very special thank you to Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers for sending us that bit of information. Rachel, we do appreciate you. Be sure to go check out the Locked On Flyers podcast if you want more information on this team before Saturday's game. But to take a little bit of a deep dive into this team here on our end, just some of the takeaways from what she said and some of the takeaways from things that I found. This Flyers team is an interesting enigma. I feel like that's kind of the word for them. Some similarities with the Dallas Stars, just in terms of how their season has gone. They found a little bit more success. But I think it's interesting that Rachel brought up, that they haven't really played a full 60 minutes so far this season, even though they've had some good games and obviously some good results so far. Does that sound familiar, though? A team that hasn't been able to put together a full 60 minutes yet this season? It sure does. That's this good old Dallas Stars team that we know and love. But just some players to kind of be on the lookout for that Rachel highlighted. Ryan Ellis and Keith Yandel. Ryan with 4, Keith with 5 points so far this season. These guys are new to the team, but they found ways to be contributors quick, playing, defensemen. But these are guys that Dallas is going to have to, be knowledgeable of. Excuse me, I don't know why it was so hard for me to say the word knowledgeable there. But these are guys that, Dallas is going to have to keep an eye on the blue line, guys that, aren't going to necessarily put up the biggest numbers, but guys that can certainly hurt a team and potentially change the game by, putting a puck in the back of the net or setting up a teammate with a nice pass. Cam Atkinson, formerly of the Columbus Blue Jackets, a lifer of the Columbus Blue Jackets organization, and Derek Brassard, a 34-year-old journeyman who also played with the Columbus Blue Jackets for a bit of time, but has seen his fair share of other NHL cities, are the two other pickups for this team this offseason that are, again, both dangerous scoring options that Dallas needs to keep an eye on, to keep in check. Like Rachel said, a lot of changes made to this team in the offseason, bringing in a lot of players. Also, the departure of Michael Raffl, who is now a Dallas Star, and is playing pretty well so far. Nothing incredible, but nothing bad by any means. Almost had a really nice goal from that really nice pass from Esa Lindell on Wednesday. But I digress, talking to you about Michael Raffl. And, of course, the big guys worth noting, Captain Claude Giroux and Sean Couturier. Just a long name, and it took me a second to get that name out. They both lead the team, are tied with 12 points. Both have been staples of this Philadelphia team for a long time. You could compare them, what Tyler and Jamie are to the Dallas Stars. Claude and Sean are just that counterpart for this Philadelphia Flyers team. Guys that, you've been watching the Stars for a long time or watching hockey for a long time. Anytime you see the Philadelphia Flyers, these guys have been there over the past several years. These are guys that know the game, know how to play the game well, are fantastic leaders of their team. And so, Dallas is going to have their hands full with several of the shifts that they're going to see from this Philadelphia Flyers team. So I'm interested to see now with the roster adjustments, how Coach Bowness draws up his lines and his shifts, rotations and whatnot going into this matchup against Philadelphia. And it is worth noting, as Rachel mentioned, Philadelphia will be playing in Dallas on Saturday, and that'll be the second game of a back-to-back, that they'll play today on Friday, Saturday against Dallas, and they'll be playing the Carolina Hurricanes, which is no easy task. That is that's going to be a tough outing for this Philadelphia Flyers team. Maybe they'll come away with a win, but definitely worth noting that, one, they'll be playing one of the best teams in the National Hockey League, then having to travel to Texas and play the Dallas Stars, not one of the best teams in the National Hockey League, but still having to play another, at least 60-minute, if not longer, hockey match game. I don't know why I said match. This isn't soccer. After playing another 60-minute, if not longer, hockey game the night before. So definitely worth keeping that in mind. Coming up next, I'll give you some predictions and keys to the game for Saturday's matchup against the Flyers. But before we do all that, I want to take a moment and say thank you to another sponsor of today's episode, and that is BetOnline. BetOnline is back and better than ever with a new web interface for the start of basketball season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And to close out today's episode of the Locked On Stars podcast, I want to take a moment and continue to talk about this game against the Philadelphia Flyers and talk about some keys to the game and my overall predictions for the game. Rachel did tell us in her preview of this team, that this team has been inconsistent so far this season. They boast a 6-3-2 record, through the early part of this season. They've struggled to play a full 60-minute game, very similar to Dallas. So I think that these teams will match up against each other quite nicely. I mentioned that the Nashville and Dallas matchup seems pretty even, and it was times where it was even, but then there were times that Dallas was shooting themselves in the foot on Wednesday night, and the game was not very evenly matched. Hopefully Dallas is able to play a little more controlled, a little more disciplined, both in the sense of penalties, but also just in their ability to control the puck, not turn it over, and get quality offensive possessions. So I expect this game to be highly competitive. Obviously, Dallas is going to be very hungry, guns a-blazing, looking for a win after a very rough, disappointing night, a lot of frustration on the bench, and obviously a lot of frustration in the locker room with the team, staying in the locker room 30 minutes after the game and not even coming out to address the media till, around 10:30, 10:45 after the game on Wednesday ended at 10. We still don't really know the details of what was said in that team meeting in the locker room. But obviously we know roster moves have been made and changes are starting to happen within this team. So this team is going to be hungry. I am hoping and that we are going to see the most determined and driven Stars team that we've seen so far this season. I expect a lot of fight. I expect everyone on this team to play hard every time that they're out on the ice. That's really just going to be the key to success, is to play hard and play fast. That sounds super simple. It sounds shallow, but that's really what the Dallas Stars need. They need to play to win. They need to play to not lose. I've said that several times on this show. I've used that term. And I think, that Dallas oftentimes is playing to not lose, and they need to flip that, and they need to play to win. There's not much to lose at this point in terms of, record or points or standings. So I say go hard, get weird, and take risks. Make sure the risks are calculated. Don't just, do dumb things and take dumb risks. But take some chances, try some new things out. It just might pay off. And if it bites you in the butt, we're not doing too much worse than we're already doing, but it just might pay off. So I expect, maybe to see what seems like a new Stars team in this game on Saturday, despite, several of the players still the same players that we've seen so far this season. Another key to the game, I think, will be, of course, on special teams. We saw the Dallas Stars penalty kill play probably their best 2 minutes of the season on Wednesday against Nashville after the one penalty from Jamie Benn. We also saw the power play score another goal, the fifth consecutive game with the power play goal for the Dallas Stars. Another productive night from the power play units could go a long way for this Stars team in helping them fight for victory against this Flyers squad. Hopefully we see a lot of discipline as far as penalties, where the team isn't on the penalty kill very much, but if they are going to be on there, hopefully we see, some phenomenal penalty kills. But also on the other end, whenever the Stars are on the man advantage, hopefully we see some really great production that we've been seeing from the man advantage from the Stars over the past several games. As far as predictions go, I have Jason Robertson with the first goal of the game, and give me 3-2 Dallas in regulation. Oh yeah, baby, it's Friday and I'm feeling weird. I'm predicting a Dallas Stars win in regulation against the Philadelphia Flyers on Saturday night. You heard it here first. I'm very excited to watch this game, and I can't wait to see what happens. And hopefully, after the game, we'll get to talk about a Dallas Stars win. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Thank you again for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day, the Locked On Bets podcast, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Be sure to subscribe and follow the show if you do not do so already. Leave a review if you like what you hear. Wherever you get your podcast at, be sure to subscribe on YouTube as well. Just search up Locked On Stars. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. That's at DANE 2_LEWIS. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Stars. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time on Monday's episode of Locked On Stars.